a statutory role, which we don't think should be diminished in any way, and so their involvement is really crucial to actually inviting the insurance industry in to provide these insurance-backed warranties. And there are suppliers in the market that are actually doing that at the moment. So there are insurers that are in the market providing these insurance-backed warranties that will survive the bill of being dead or departed.
All right, John, thank you. As always, John Gray from Hobans. With an eye on the time, this is speed news. Actually, no pun intended. I just noticed it's a pun because this story's gone international out of New Zealand. Now, the relationship between garden gnomes in Hawke's Bay and the consumption of methamphetamine. Police busted a house in Flaxmere and discovered 300 stolen garden ornaments, pot plants, gnomes and pink flamingos. What isn't clear, panellists, is whether taking pee makes you want to steal gnomes or whether you steal them to sell them and fund your habit.
Well, this is why I kept quiet in the last story. I care about buildings, but I really wanted to hear this on national radio. I think garden gnomes and pee is the greatest New Zealand story this year so far.
It's going to give you all your material, isn't it, for your next dozen gigs?
Because are they selling the gnomes to get the pee? Are they putting the pee in the gnomes? Are the gnomes telling them how to smoke the pee? Are they smoking the gnomes? So many questions.
Yes, it is a confused situation. Police say there's a growing trend in Hawke's Bay of stealing garden decorations and then selling or trading them to get money for methamphetamine.
Hawke's Bay.
I've got time to ask you about another story that's gone around the world to do with the goalkeeper who ate the pie on the sideline.
Never come between a big man and his pie.
Indeed, although that was hard to pick up. Sutton United's, and there's a bigger issue here, which is why we're talking about it. Sutton United's substitute goalkeeper Wayne Shaw eating a pie while his team lost 2-0 to Arsenal, had to resign, may face action from the Gambling Commission and the Football Association after it emerged that a betting company had offered odds of 8-1 against any Sutton United player tucking into a pie during the game. So the question, should the goalkeeper have been fired, or should betting sites be told not to offer bets like this?
Well, is he known to eat a pie, or was he? Is this a weird match-fixing pie scam?
It was no surprise he ate a pie, apparently.
Right. Was he meant to be in the goal?
He likes his pies, I think.
Like, did they lose 2-0 because he was meant to be in a goal but tucked off to the side to eat a pie?
No, I think he was just the reserve on the day.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, I don't think he should. I mean, it sounds like he'd have more of a case for wrongful dismissal than...
But he tucked into the pie because he knew about the bet.
Yes,
that's
no
the
doubt.
issue. Yeah.
Yeah, as a joke, presumably.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's not a joke because you could lose and make money on it. Of course he should be fired. Then he can eat as many pies as he wants.
We won't be able to afford them.
But
well,
don't you wonder why we allow betting that tempts players who want a bit of a giggle, if that's what happened, into serious trouble?
I think if you're betting on whether another human being is going to eat a pie, you have larger issues to worry about.
And Ali Jones, I know you have some sort of Fitbit. The 10,000 steps a day for fitness has been disparaged at a big meeting, scientific meeting in America. What's your view of
No, I find it marvellous for telling me who's ringing when I haven't got my phone next to me and it's off, and for waking me up in the morning with a gentle vibration, is how they put it in the instructions, and so that's what I use it for.
Okay, but you're not seduced by the 10,000 steps a day?
No, I do 10,000 at the weekend, but it's normally about 3.5 during the week, so I don't look at it.
Ali Jones, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim.
And James Nokise, you too, James.
Thank you, mate.
And we're back tomorrow. Checkpoint coming up.
Kia ora everyone, I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. Tonight, John's in Christchurch to mark the 6th anniversary of the quakes and to celebrate the work of emergency service staff who worked through the quakes and more recently through the Port Hills fires. He speaks to a fireman who received a bravery award in 2011 and has been unable to return to the city centre until today. Also tonight, confusion after a meeting between business leaders in Cadbury and Dunedin. More on the shock resignation of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council Chief Executive Andrew Newman. And Watercare denies allegations it purposely delayed consultation on a proposed water treatment plant in West Auckland.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon, ko Katrina Batanaho. Auckland Transport is repairing its reputation after a senior manager was today jailed for 5 years for taking more than $1.1 million in bribes. Roading manager Murray Noon was jailed for 5 years and the director of the engineering company, Stephen Borlase, for 5.5 years when they appeared in the High Court in Auckland today. As well as cash, Noon and his second in charge, Barry George, accepted thousands of dollars in overseas travel and other perks. Outside court, Auckland Transport's Chief Infrastructure Officer Greg Edmonds says the case has had an impact on staff morale and tarnished the organisation's reputation.
The impact on us is we have to rebuild the trust and confidence of the public of Auckland to say that, we do actually look after their money and spend it wisely and appropriately, and that's an ongoing process that we've been doing since then.
Greg Edmonds from Auckland Transport. Family members of those who died in the Christchurch earthquake are relieved they have finally somewhere to remember their loved ones. Today's earthquake 6th anniversary service was used to dedicate a memorial wall to the 185 victims. It's made of marble and stretches 200 metres along the banks of the Avon River. Bruce McKecken, who lost his son Matthew, says it will for the first time provide family members, the people of Christchurch and visitors, a place to reflect on that day 6 years ago.
Anyone coming from out of town coming to Christchurch, this will now become part of the feature. You come to Christchurch, see what used to be a cathedral, and now you can come and have a look at a memorial wall, and this will stand the test of time. That'll be here as a feature for a long period.
Bruce McKecken says it's great having the memorial on the banks of the Avon, which has a special place in the hearts of so many people. A court today has heard of the last moments of a Hawera toddler who was killed by her father in 2015. Justice Ellis was sentencing Philip Murray Kinraid, who earlier admitted manslaughter in the High Court in New Plymouth today. She said when Esme proved difficult to get off to sleep, Kinraid forced her face into a pillow.
You said you monitored her breathing and the noises she was making and held her in that face-down position for 5 to 10 minutes, after which you said she settled, letting out a shuddering breath.
Defence counsel Paul Keegan said from the beginning his client had admitted responsibility for Esme's death, which he described as a tragic accident. Justice Ellis jailed Kinraid for 4 years and 3 months. The American President Donald Trump has confirmed he's close to finalising details on a new executive order to replace his controversial travel ban. Earlier, a court ruled that the restrictions on people from 7 mainly Muslim countries was unlawful. The ABC's Greg Jennett has more from Washington.
International uproar and travel chaos came from Donald Trump's first order in January, and he's been indicating a revised executive order taking legal objections into account is due out this week.
We have to have a safe country. We have to let people come in that are going to love the country.
The Australian government will today have its highest level face-to-face contact with the administration. Julie Bishop is in town to meet the Vice President Mike Pence.
Greg Jennett. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today praised his Australian counterpart Malcolm Turnbull for what he said was calling out the hypocrisy of the United Nations. Mr Netanyahu has begun a 4-day visit to Australia and has highlighted an article Mr Turnbull has written for the Australian newspaper today, criticising the UN for adopting what he labelled one-sided resolutions against Israel's settlements in Palestinian territories. Mr Netanyahu said he was surprised and delighted to read the comments.
Australia's been courageously willing to puncture UN hypocrisy more than once. So the UN is capable of many absurdities, and I think it's important that you have straightforward and clear-eyed countries like Australia that often bring it back to earth.
Benjamin Netanyahu's trip to Australia has attracted strong protests. It's 5:04. To sport, South Africa are chasing 290 to win the second one-day cricket international against New Zealand in Christchurch. A short time ago, the Proteas were 116 for 3 after 23 overs. Earlier, Ross Taylor scored his 17th one-day century on the last ball of the innings. Taylor now has the most one-day tons by any New Zealander, surpassing Nathan Astel's total of 16. The Highlanders coach Tony Brown says they love playing the Chiefs, and for good reason. The Highlanders have the wood over the Chiefs. The Southerners have won their last 6 Super Rugby encounters, including 2 clashes last season. Brown has named 5 debutants in his squad for Friday's match in Dunedin and will start all his All Blacks apart from Elliot Dixon, who's on the bench. Brown says they can't wait to kick off their season.
Pretty great way to start for us. We enjoy playing the Chiefs and we enjoy playing at home. So to get a double whammy there is going to be great, and hopefully in front of a full stadium.
Tony Brown. Meanwhile, 21-year-old Mitchell Karpik will make his Super Rugby debut at flanker for the Chiefs. He's in for Sam Cane, who's recovering from an ankle injury. Taranaki midfielder Johnny Fa'uli will also make his debut at second 5/8. The Western Sydney Wanderers Football Club has suspended 14 members of the Red and Black Bloc supporter group for displaying a banner depicting Sydney FC coach Graham Arnold in a sex act during their A-League match at the weekend. The club says the 14 members will be banned for 18 months across all competitions. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, is it time we took a more Australian approach to reducing the risk of wildfires? Given Christchurch just suffered a fire on an Australian scale, I speak with the fire researcher Grant Pearce. Simon Morris reviews the latest from Martin Scorsese during At the Movies, and Johnny Blades discusses things specific, including Australia's dumb idea to send asylum seekers to the United States, on Nights after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waitomo, also Coromandel Bay of Plenty in Taupō. Fine spells, isolated afternoon showers today and again tomorrow afternoon in the west. Taranaki to Kapiti, also Taumarunui and Taihape, fine and mostly sunny. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Wellington, fine today, becoming cloudy in Wairarapa and Wellington overnight with possible drizzle patches, then spreading north tomorrow, bringing showers from afternoon. Bulla, Nelson and Marlborough mostly fine, however patchy rain for Bulla later today and overnight drizzle in eastern Marlborough. A few heavy showers inland tomorrow afternoon. Westland and Bulla, showers clearing from the south today, mainly fine tomorrow. Canterbury, North Otago and Dunedin, areas of cloud, a few showers mainly inland and possibly heavy in the south this afternoon, clearing tomorrow morning. Central Otago, Clutha and Southland, mostly fine, however a few showers about the south coast later today and overnight. The Chatham Islands cloudy, isolated showers tomorrow. It's coming up to 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
I now invite representatives of the emergency services to unveil the Canterbury Earthquake National Memorial.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Christchurch and its memorial wall, the Canterbury Earthquake National Memorial. It is called on the banks of the Avon River, just off Oxford Terrace, a short walk from the CBD, which is behind me as I speak to you tonight. 185 people died as a result of the earthquake that happened here 6 years ago today. Their names are cut into the marble beside where we are broadcasting live from tonight. The name I'm touching now, Andrew, Christian, Ross, Craig. You watch the families come along here and they all touch the names of their loved ones. Tonight we talk about Christchurch then, now and in the future. Almost 2/3 of the people who lost their lives as a result of that earthquake were in the CTV building. And this time, exactly 6 years ago, a firefighter called Terry Jide and other firefighters were in the crushed and smouldering rubble of that collapsed building, fighting to save lives. Over the past week and a bit, they've been up on the Port Hills, the same firefighters, fighting to save Christchurch again. Tonight, a celebration of those men and women. Terry Jide risked everything in the CTV building. He and other firefighters were awarded for their bravery. He's never gone back. 6 years on, he tells me what he remembers of that terrible day.
It's the day that the city changed. It's the day that my life changed. In so many ways, you know, I've just walked through the city now. It's probably the first time I've actually walked through the city since the earthquake. And
in 6 years?
Only if you go to a restaurant that there's nothing here for us to go to. So we go to the restaurants in the suburbs and what have you. And the only time we drive through the city is when we go into Central Station to change some breathing apparatus cylinders or something or other. We don't come in often.
Did you go near the CTV site?
I've never been to it apart from now. I just walked through it and saw a lot of Asian people paying their dues to the people who lost their life.
I don't think that you're going to tell me the specific details, so forgive me for embarrassing you by saying them. That building collapsed, as we all know. The fourth floor was condensed into an area of about 60 centimetres. You crawled in there without breathing apparatus, despite the fact there was a very real risk of being killed by the smoke. You crawled past the bodies of people and you managed to get people out who were trapped beneath beams. One student had to have an amputation. You saved lives and you risked your own life.
Yeah, I guess we did, you know. It's just when I turned up at the site at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you just look at bedlam, you know. Here's a building on the deck and you go, oh my God, where the hell do I start? And so the bosses were, you know, giving you instruction, what have you, and then later on I went round the back of the building and saw that there were a group of guys that had found a pocket of Asian students, and from there we kind of created a train, you know. And for a start my job was just simply a gopher, so if they needed something or they needed blocks chopped off or whatever to try and chop the hole so that when you went in it didn't kill you, then that's what it was. And then as people got more and more tired and were able to drag out victims, then you move further up the chain until it was your shot at it.
You had to get bodies out to get to the survivors, right?
Yep. Yeah. From memory, they said that there was 16 we pulled out of that hole, and there was 8 deceased and 8 were alive. And they were all trapped by their feet. That was the overwhelming thing, was every single one of them was trapped by their feet. And to try and get rid of them was the most difficult thing, you know, because you couldn't take equipment in, you couldn't wear helmets or have any protective gear on whatsoever apart from just a coat. And when you did start choking on the smoke because the fire was still burning, we just got one of the other guys to go out of the hole and then get a breathing cylinder, and we would just turn the cylinder on so that we could breathe a little bit and then turn it off and just use it sparingly, you know.
You left the CTV building to go to the Pine Gould building, which is just extraordinary to me. I mean, that's just unbelievably brave. And you went back into a similar situation. But you also, in a larger sense, kept firefighting, and you've been fighting the blazes up on the Port Hills this week, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. PGC was, we come back home and thought, oh, well, that's it. We're done and dusted for the night. And then they said, no, we need a crew to shoot down to PGC. And I went down with the young guy who was just a rookie, an 18-year-old guy, Josh. And you know, we were both scared shitless, and then to have, you know, go into a building with a young guy, and I just take my hat off to the guy for an 18-year-old kid that's just out of school. The bravery that he showed was just amazing.
I think today we've been reminded of all of this because of the fires in the Port Hills.
Yeah.
Steve Askin lost his life, of course, and there were some close calls, I understand. There were some guys up by appliances as the flames started to turn back towards them. So once again, you're risking your lives for Christchurch. And I think people just want to say thank you this week. Do you have that sense of it?
Oh, the public here have been amazing. You know, I live over in Governor's Bay, and the community there has been fantastic. For the volunteer fire brigade, the men and women over there have done a sterling job. And the community rallied right behind them, and it was just food and what have you, people just going in there doing whatever they could to help. And the same things happened here, like we're turning up to fill up the fire engine with fuel or whatever, and you know, people are coming up and can we buy you a coffee and shake your hand and thanks very much. And it's nice to be in a job that you are appreciated, you know. I love my job, you know. I wouldn't be doing it now at 56 if I didn't.
Did you ever think of giving it up?
No.
And are there days when you struggle with what you remember?
I try not to remember it. Yeah, just Paul Rod will put it in good terms. Like, I struggled after the event because you often challenge yourself and go, my God, what, you know, how the hell did I do what I did? And you know, the guys that did the amputations, I didn't do those, but you're just thinking, oh my God, could I have done that? I'm not too sure. But Paul put it in an amazing way, and that was, you know, it was actually an honour to be able to go out there and serve your people. All that training we did over those 25 years prior to it, you think, oh, for Christ's sake, we've got to go and do this, and what a pain in the ass that is. And then to actually be able to apply all that training, and we used every ounce of training plus more to get through what we did, and every firefighter, emergency worker went, and the public went way beyond anything that you could ever ask of someone.
That's Terry Jide, who risked everything in that building. He was with a man called Paul Rodwell. We'll speak to Paul after 6 o'clock tonight. We'll also talk to Rhonda McNichol, who was camp mother, logistics controller for the fire service then and now. She went to work on February 22nd, 2011 and didn't go home for 5 days. They will join us later in Checkpoint. 185 names in the wall beside me here. Bruce McKeegan's son, Matty, was working at Southern Ink Tattoo in Manchester Street, right in the heart of Christchurch City. As the quake struck, he and his colleagues fled for their lives, as you would, and so did their customers. Matty died, as did Rachel Conley, an American backpacker who was ending her big OE, the trip of a lifetime, by getting a tattoo. Matty and Rachel died together, and that brought their families together. Complete strangers prior to the earthquake. Rachel's stepmother and stepsister made their first trip to New Zealand for the unveiling of the memorial wall, and they are staying with Matty's family, his parents, Bruce and Jeanette, sister Sarah. I spoke with them after the memorial service this afternoon. People are on the wall, side by side, if they died side by side. And here's Rachel Elizabeth Conley and Matty Stewart McKeon. And they died together, and their families are together here now. I'm just going to go along. Can you say your names as you go along? You're Matty's mum.
I'm Jeanette.
Lovely to meet you, Jeanette. Bruce.
I'm Bruce. Hi.
Matty's sister.
Sarah.
Lovely to meet you, Sarah. And are you Rachel's sister?
Stepsister, but yes, sister. Lauren.
Lovely to meet you. And Rachel's stepmum.
Yes, my name is Deb.
And this is, it's big, isn't it? And it's beautiful and it's moving, and it must be hard to take all of this in.
It is very overwhelming, but it's the people that we've interacted with here in Christchurch have been very warm and welcoming, and our host, Bruce and Jeanette McKeegan, have been very, very helpful for us and have guided us through this whole week. So it's been a wonderful journey that we've traveled with them over the last several years that we've known them, just finally meeting them this past week.
So you've been talking to them for 6 years now, the best part of 6 years, but this is your first time in Christchurch.
That is correct, yes.
And these are terribly blunt questions, and I apologise, but your children, your beautiful children, died together.
Yes, it's the thing that kind of links us forever. They're stuck with us. And it's just a bond that we'll share.
It's a terrible bond to share, isn't it?
It is.
What do you make of all of this? It's so calm and peaceful and lovely here today. It's impossible to imagine the chaos and carnage and terror of 6 years ago at this very moment.
It is hard to imagine, especially being a whole half the earth away. But it's wonderful, and this is exactly what we were hoping for coming here, was to find some peace and to find some comfort after 6 long years, some closure. So.
And have you got that?
Yes. Last night was very hard, and today was just kind of calm. It was very nice, so much needed.
Thank you for the generosity of talking to us. And you guys, this is very special because you've made friends in the most terrible circumstances. And also, Bruce, as we discussed on Checkpoint last night, you played a real role on behalf of the families. And in terms of this wall, it's very moving. And if we look along the line, people walk up to the name of their loved one and they touch it. They touch it.
Yep, that's the whole key. That's the key point. That's when you know you've got it right. That's when you see family members coming along, stopping, spending a minute looking at the name and then actually touching it. And it's that touching that creates that bond between the individual and the wall.
It's so tough. It doesn't get any easier, does it?
No, it doesn't. I think you learn to live with it, but it doesn't get any easier at all. But not a day goes past where we don't think of Matthew. And it's a journey we just need to take.
He was your big bro, right? I can tell that. Yeah. And what was he like?
He was fantastic. He was just the life of the party and just lovely and caring and touched everyone's souls. He was just the best.
That's a lovely way to be described by your sister.
Yes, definitely. I hope that it's the same for me. So, yeah.
I'm sure he would, having met you. Can you tell me a little bit about Rachel? What was she doing in Christchurch?
She'd just finished traveling for about 15 months. traveled through Cambodia and Vietnam and several other countries. She'd been working in Wellington for about a year and came down to Christchurch with her traveling partner. They were getting ready to come home the next day back to America. But she had a whirlwind of a trip and loved every minute of it and touched so many people that we've been lucky enough to meet on this trip, which has been great.
Coming home the next day.
Yeah. So, quite tragic.
Well, she's here now, and she's with us, and she's in this wall. And I don't know that you could have done a better job, Bruce, of reflecting how much has been lost and how much the city has taken these people into their hearts.
Oh, it has. There's a lot of people who've done a lot of work on this project, and hats off to all of them. It's been a wonderful team to work with. Yep.
That's Bruce. Maddie's dad, Rachel and Maddie are together behind me on the wall, the very beginning of the wall if you approach it from the city end. Further along the wall this afternoon we found Francisco Torres. Francisco's sister, Elsa de Frood, was the Director of Studies at the King's Education Language School in the CTV building. She died along with 115 others in that building, including 70 students and 10 staff from the language school. I asked Francisco to point out his sister's name on the wall here.
I am very glad and very proud of my sister because she came in 1985 to New Zealand and she did a great job as a teacher until she died.
And many of the students who died in the CTV building were at her language school, right?
70 of them, yeah.
70 of the students were her kids at her language school.
Exactly, yes. English, King's Education, English school. She used to work since 2002 approximately, so it was more than 10 years, or almost 10 years, sorry. Yes.
So 185 people died in the earthquake 6 years ago today, and 70 of them were students at your sister's school.
Exactly. And just students 70, and from the staff 10 people. Yes. Including, for example, I can remember here Brian Warrington Taylor. He was the manager, the general manager of the school.
They've done a lovely thing that the people who've died together are together on the wall, right?
Exactly.
So they've kept them together. I think that's. I think that was an inspiring.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it is fantastic.
Yes, it's fantastic, really. Yes, I was putting in my mind the idea of being together even when they pass away. Yes,
and
you are right.
You've come from Peru to be here.
From Peru, yes. Well, thanks to my sister, actually, when in 1990. I was able to come with my family here.
Oh, right, so you're a Kiwi, aren't you?
Oh, yes. I am All Blacks fan, and yes, I love racing as well. It's another passion that I have because my father, or our father, used to be a horse trainer in Peru. Yes, and I keep that sport as a hobby. And also my brother is the best Latin American musician in New Zealand.
How cool is that?
He's named Gerardo Torres, and his band Matecito. Yes.
And so how are you feeling today as you stand here and look at your sister's name on the wall and look at all the other families looking at their loved ones' names?
Very proud of my sister, and loving so much and blessing as well this country, because people, everything in general has been so grateful and so nice to us, really. And always my heart will beat for New Zealand and also for my country of origin, Peru, certainly. Yes, but I love New Zealand very much. So, yes. And I tell you what, today for me was the first time because I was back in Peru. And it was so emotional. Tears can drop from my eyes all the time, but always thinking with gratitude for this country. And just one anecdote that I can say. My sister was the most humble person. Never wanted. One day I advised her, Elsie, because you are doing so great job here as a teacher and then now as a director of studies. Why not call a journalist and make an interview and write on the paper, and you will be quite famous? And she said, no, I don't want to. Leave it there like that. No, I am happy like I am, and that's it, because her passion and her love for education was the main thing for her, really. Yes. So she was very happy as what she did. Yes.
Francisco Torres, the brother of the head of the King's College Language School. 70 of their students died in the CTV building. Unbelievable. Raf Manji is standing beside me here. If you are listening, we are live from the wall in Christchurch, the Memorial Wall. Raf Manji is the City Councillor and also the head of the Finance and Performance Committee for the Council. Raf, let's talk briefly about today. It was lovely, wasn't it?
It was a beautiful day. I mean, it is a day of remembrance, but also a day of celebration. And a number of the families that I spoke to actually were celebrating rather than commiserating, and they were just really so happy with the way the wall has turned out. I mean, a project like this can be controversial, but everybody I've spoken to just loves it. And I think it would be a real place for people to actually come and, feel like they're part of it and remember what happened, but also look forward.
Right, not only was there a great loss of life, 185 lives lost, but Christchurch lost a lot of what made it Christchurch, certainly in terms of infrastructure, buildings, the city, the CBD, that kind of thing. 6 years on, how is our second largest city going in the business of looking like our second largest city again?
Yeah, we're good. We're good, actually. Talking of the infrastructure, the SCIRT program is just about to come to an end. It was supposed to finish in September 2016. We'll finish at the end of March of this year. So basically most of the big infrastructure projects have been completed and completed well. There is going to be a long tail of infrastructure issues going forward, which we will just have to bear. So that's going well. The community rebuilding project process is going really well. All community centres, libraries, the stuff that people really live in and day out, that's going really smoothly. We have the town hall is almost halfway through. The library is up and running. So actually we're in pretty good shape. Most of the insurance matters have been settled, though there will be a very difficult long tail, and I spoke with the chair of EQC today about that, so they're working hard on that process. So all in all, things are looking up. When you come into the central city, the retail precinct is looking fantastic. The new crossing development is going to be completed this year. The terraces will be completed. We do have a few issues. I mean, obviously the cathedral continues to be a festering sore, and the people there's nothing we can do about it, but it's a great frustration to all. And of course, we've got some very big holes still in the city with the convention centre.
Can I interrupt? What's happening with the convention centre?
Well, as far as I know, they are going out for a design and build contract sometime this year. So that's good news. The Metro Sports is underway. I mean, we've spoken about the convention centre before. It's a very big footprint in a key area of the city, so they've got to get it right. And there are a lot of questions still around that.
It felt declaratory and it felt important at the time. It felt like a vote of faith in the future and a foot-stamping exercise to say this is what we can do. This is how big it can be. Does it now, after 6 years of taking stock and looking around, feel at odds with the rest of what's happening?
Yeah, it does. If you look at the successful projects, they've generally been a finer grain, a little bit smaller. And there's no doubt if we were contemplating a convention centre now, you wouldn't be putting it there. It's the prime residential land in the city, right beside the river. You'd be putting it probably over where the stadium is. Now, whether it's too late for that, I don't know. But I think they're going to struggle to fit it in on that footprint, and it will take up a huge amount of space.
Isn't it about getting it right? So much was lost, and Christchurch has the opportunity. It didn't ask for it. It didn't want it. To start again. Isn't it important, given the cost of that opportunity, to get it right now?
Absolutely. And again, I think probably the first interview we did in 2014, I think I talked about always reviewing plans. You always review a plan as you go along. And I think one of the problems with the blueprint is that it's just being persevered with, even when perhaps it might be a case of, actually, this is all happening. Maybe we don't need to do as much. When you look at the south frame, you look at the east frame, big chunks of compulsory acquisition, big chunks of spare land where nothing is happening at the moment. So the residential piece is also behind. So when you look at the big holes in the city, they're from those big anchor projects. And of course, a lot of that was about confidence. Well, the confidence is here. The stuff that is coming in the central city is fantastic.
Can we talk about the psychological confidence of the people here who have been, I mean, everyone says resilient. You must be sick to death of hearing that bloody word in Christchurch. But was that dented by the Port Hill fires that began last Monday? Was that just a blow to the psyche of the city, or are people in good stock?
I think actually people handled that pretty well. I mean, if you look at it, we've had the earthquakes, we've had floods, we've had fires, and we're still standing and we're still going. And I think the way people reacted, I think, was borne out in the amount of people who ended up at welfare systems, at the welfare centres. There was about 11 people because everyone just went to friends and family. So that really told me something, that actually people had networks that they could, lock into, and that people could help them and get through it. So it was a bit of a shock, but I think actually in terms of the psyche, actually we're kind of getting used to that. So that's where the resilience piece comes in, but it still affects people. Anyone who's lost their house, anyone who's had their house affected by smoke, of course they're going to be impacted. But the city largely has learned to live with this. And actually New Zealand will have to learn to live with that, as will other people around the world.
Raf Manji, City Councillor and Head of the Finance and Performance Committee. Thank you so much, Raf. Nice to have you down here this evening. That's it from Christchurch and the Memorial Wall for the time being. We will be back here with some more special guests after 6 o'clock. But in the meantime, back to the Auckland studio and Sharon.
Thank you, John. And coming up, a 90-minute meeting arranged to discuss the Cadbury closure ends with confusion in Dunedin. And the future of the $900 million Ruataniwha water storage project in Hawke's Bay looks in doubt following the sudden resignation of the Regional Council CEO, Andrew Newman. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
Auckland Transport is repairing its reputation after a senior manager was today jailed for taking more than $1.1 million in bribes. Roading manager Murray Noon was jailed for 5 years and the director of an engineering company, Stephen Borlase, for 5.5 years when they appeared in the High Court in Auckland today. As well as cash, Noon and his second in charge, Barry George, accepted thousands of dollars in overseas travel and other perks. Family members of those who died in the Christchurch earthquake are relieved they finally have somewhere to remember their loved ones. Today's Quake 6th anniversary service was used to dedicate a memorial wall to the 185 victims. It's made of marble and stretches 200 metres along the banks of the Avon River. The Prime Minister Bill English says he stands by New Zealand's strong backing of a United Nations resolution on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Australian Prime Minister has today heavily criticised the resolution for placing too much blame on Israel for a lack of peace in the long-running dispute. A Hawera father has been sentenced to 4 years and 3 months jail for smothering his 2-year-old daughter in 2015. Philip Murray Kinraid had earlier admitted to manslaughter in the High Court in New Plymouth. The American President Donald Trump has confirmed he's close to finalising details on a new executive order to replace his controversial travel ban. Earlier, a court ruled that the restrictions on people from 7 mainly Muslim countries was unlawful. Firefighters are using drones to monitor hotspots in the Port Hills and ensure the fire doesn't break out again. The fire is under control, but more than 250 firefighters are working to prevent flare-ups. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Kia ora, Katrina. Turning to business news now with Nona Peltier. And Nona, what's the latest on the Sky TV and Vodafone merger?
Well, just late this afternoon, the High Court in Auckland made a decision to put a 3-day pause on any merger plans between Sky and Vodafone if the Commerce Commission decides tomorrow morning to give them the green light to go ahead with that merger. They said there was a great deal of public interest and consumer interest in making sure that other parties have a chance to review that decision before Sky and Vodafone go ahead with their merger plans, should they be given the approval. Meanwhile, Sky also had their first half result today. It wasn't very good. It's kind of what the market was expecting, so the share price didn't fall very much. However, it's really reflecting a difficult trading position for the company. Their share price fell, as I said, but their first half net profit was down 32%. Which is pretty significant.
And another takeover offer for the insurer Tower. What's happening, Nona?
I guess everyone loves it, right? The Canadians made a bid for it, I guess a few weeks ago, and now the board said, "Oh, great offer! $1.17. Why don't you guys, think about taking that?" That's what they recommended to shareholders, unless a better offer came ahead. And guess what? We got a better offer on the table today. Suncor hasn't quite made their offer. They're so far just planning to take 20% with an intention to go the whole way. They're offering $1.30, which is a premium to the Fairfax offer. So we'll see what happens. But it looks like for Tower shareholders, it was pretty happy days. Their share price definitely climbed today. It was a bit of a darling. It went up. Let's see. Yeah, 17% by 19 cents. So pretty good deal there for Tower shareholders.
A big day for results again today. Now, Fletcher Building's first half result disappointed the market. Why was that?
Well, it's funny, the market might have got a bit of ahead of itself because Fletcher Building had forecast full year profit guidance, and they're saying they're on track to meet that. You would have thought that'd make the market happy, but no. In fact, the market had an expectation that Fletcher should be doing better than their own expectations. And so Fletcher had some kind of a significant loss. Wouldn't quantify exactly what it was. Said it was in the tens of millions of dollars. It relates to a large construction project, which it also wouldn't define. The market seems to think it could be potentially the convention center project that's not meeting expectations. But because of the lack of disclosure and this expectation, they marked the share price down 5% today. So yeah, it was a hard day on the market for Fletcher, and that drove the whole market down really by 0.75%. That's 53 points down to 7,062. And our dollar was a little bit soft, but less about our Kiwi dollar and more about what's happening in the world. It was finished a little change in the end, 71.6 US cents. 93.1 Australian, which is the lower end of a range we haven't, we've seen for a few months now, and 57.3 pence.
Nona, thank you very much. That's Nona Peltier, our business reporter. Now, in breaking news, police say a tourist bus has left the road near Akaroa. They're on their way to the scene, and we'll bring you more on this story as it comes to hand. A senior council roading manager was able to receive over $1.1 million in payments from a council contractor for over 7.5 years without his bosses knowing. The country's largest bribery case came to an end today when senior roading manager Murray Noon was jailed for 5 years and the director of the engineering company Stephen Borlase was jailed for 5.5 years. Our Auckland reporter Edward Gay filed this story.
Justice Fitzgerald said Noon worked as a contractor for Borlase's Progens engineering company in 2000. 6 years later, he was employed by the Rodney District Council as Director of Transport. He told the council CEO that he was still doing private consultancy work, but didn't mention doing any work for Progens.
Rather, you indicated that your primary client was Queenstown Lakes District Council, but that the work was winding down. That was untrue, as at that time you were receiving far greater sums of money from Progens, and those payments were by no means winding down. In fact, they would only wind up.
While at the Rodney District Council, Noon sent invoices of between $8,000 and $10,000 to Progens every month bar one for consultancy services, but no work was done. He continued to bill Progens when Rodney was amalgamated into Auckland Council and he was made a manager at Auckland Transport. In all, Progens paid him over $1.1 million. And it wasn't just cash. Progens was giving him and his second-in-charge, Barry George, other benefits.
These related mainly to international travel, for example, paying for upgrades to business class fares for international travel, travel and accommodation in Dubai, family travel to and accommodation in Australia, and paying for your mobile telephone bills.
The company even paid for 55 nights of hotel accommodation as Noon was going through a rough patch in his marriage. Justice Fitzgerald said he had 4 discussions with his bosses about his consultancy work, but never made any mention of his work for Progens. George, who gave evidence for the Crown and is serving a sentence of 10 months home detention, received over $100,000 in travel, including trips to Cambodia, Thailand, Fiji and Hong Kong and other benefits.
I found these payments and benefits were provided in connection with and with the intent to influence Mr Noon and Mr George in their official roles.
The judge said it was important to note that there was no evidence that Noon or George helped Progens with tender processes during their time at Rodney or Auckland Transport.
There is no doubt that the payments and benefits provided to Mr Noon and to Mr George were provided in the context of a culture of collaboration being encouraged by both RDC and Auckland Transport. However, I want to make clear that a culture of collaboration in no way extended to, sanctioned or excused the provision of such significant payments and benefits.
She said the case was more serious than that of former Labour MP Taito Philip Field and had the ability to damage New Zealand's international reputation. Outside court, Auckland Transport's Chief Infrastructure Officer Greg Edmonds said the case had had an impact on staff morale and tarnished the organisation's reputation. He said the offending came to light when he and others started questioning some of the paperwork they were being asked to sign.
We were asking some commercial questions as to why we were giving this particular supplier this level of work and at this price. And over a period of, I suppose, 6 to 9 months, we built up a view that maybe there was something that was not quite right within the way this work was being allocated.
He said council workers now have to disclose every gift they receive worth over $100. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi ko Edward Gaiaho.
The union representing Cadbury workers walked out of a forum today on the likely closure of the company's factory in Dunedin. The closure would mean the loss of more than 350 jobs, which Dunedin's leaders would say would be a huge blow to the city. The mayoral forum included local MPs, business associations and representatives from Cadbury's owner Mondelez International. Dunedin North MP David Clark was at the meeting. Good afternoon, David.
Good afternoon, Sharon.
And how would you describe the meeting today?
Oh, look, it was a frank meeting. It was a meeting where we put on the table what the position was for each of us in terms of the people we represent. And Claire Curran and myself, as the two electorate MPs for Labour, were there, and a National List MP and a representation from another office. And the company itself shared where it was at in the process. And, you know, I'm sure your listeners will know it's the fourth biggest employer in the city. The 362 jobs that will be lost will affect the whole of Dunedin. So not just my electorate, the plant sits in Dunedin North, but also workers across into Dunedin South as well. So it's going to have a huge impact on the city, and everybody around the table wanted to make sure they understood the situation correctly, and also wanted it to be clear that they wanted to have a constructive part in the process going forward.
So what happened? Why did Etu walk out?
Well, Etu walked out because they were worried about a conflict, because part of the meeting was to discuss possibilities if the factory was to shut down, and they are entering into a good faith process with Mondelez about the possibility of the factory staying open. And I think they were right and honourable in the situation to exempt themselves from the discussion. One of the outcomes of the meeting was a commitment by the group to make sure that worker representation was brought in at the appropriate point when they felt that was right. Because what we had, of course, in this situation was civic leaders, but also the management of Mondelez and not the voice directly of the workers. And, you know, there's an imperative, in my view, that we actually have the workers shaping any outcome that we get, particularly if we find ourselves in the position where the plant is to close.
But what's the problem here, David? Is it that the company isn't being clear enough about the closure?
Well, the company itself has goals as a global multinational that are incredibly ambitious, I should say, for shareholder returns. They profess to be concerned about the fate of the workers in Dunedin, but I think some around the table are sceptical about what that really means and whether and where that sits in the decision-making process. We've got to take them at face value, and their suggestion that they do want to do right by the workers, I want to take at face value, and I want to hear more about how they are going to ensure that workers receive fair redundancies, that they are allowed to move on to other work situations without losing the redundancy provisions, and how they are going to make sure that every worker there has a skills audit and training if necessary to find other work.
So what's the next step?
So the next step, a commitment from the group to meet at the latest when the process that's underway now is finished, the negotiation between the union and the management, to ensure that that we are involved in the conversation going forward. The government has been notably absent up till now. The Economic Development Minister said that he thought the decision had already been taken when he first heard about it, so they haven't chosen to get involved, but civic leaders have stood up and said, we think that there is a conversation to be had here. And one of the commitments we got out of Cadbury's, the Mondelez, was that they would come back to us with what options for retaining an ongoing operation might look like, even in part, because that's not something we've heard much about up till now. It's been presented largely as a case they can see no way around, and we need to see what a case for staying open might look like, even if they think that's extraordinarily unlikely. Those around the table who are civic leaders in Dunedin want to see all the options that are on the table.
Thank you, David. That's Dunedin North MP David Clark. It's been revealed that the pilot killed in yesterday's plane crash in Melbourne was being investigated in relation to an incident 18 months ago. The aircraft slammed into the roof of the DFO Retail Outlet Centre and burst into flames shortly after takeoff from Essendon Airport. On board were the pilot and 4 American tourists. They were all killed in the accident, Elizabeth Brown reports.
Air safety investigators have been picking through the smouldering wreckage and say they'll be there for several days. It's been reported that the plane suffered catastrophic engine failure, and today it was revealed the pilot, 63-year-old Max Quartermain, who had more than 38 years flying experience, was involved in a close shave with another plane in 2015. The head of the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, Greg Hood, says his agency does not engage in speculation about the cause of the crash.
We're in the process of gathering the evidence and in doing so look extensively across all of the possible causal factors of the accident. That includes maintenance records, the history of the aeroplane, the history of the pilot, the weight and balance. It involves previous accidents in relation to the Super King Air, for example. So at this very early stage, certainly we're not going to speculate in relation to any specific part of the investigation.
Greg Hood says the crash site is proving challenging for investigators.
There are portions of the aircraft on the roof of the retail facility, and obviously there's an extensive site in the car park of that facility that requires examination.
The 4 passengers on board the plane were American golfing buddies from Texas who were playing their way around the world on what's been described as a trip of a lifetime. They were on their way to play on a luxury course on King Island and Bass Strait when tragedy struck. Victorian Police Superintendent Michael Fruin says police are supporting the men's families and are helping to repatriate their bodies, which remain in the wreckage due to safety concerns at the accident site.
Obviously, it's a really difficult and traumatic time for them. We're making arrangements with them collaboratively with regards to repatriation of the body, support with regards to other members of their families that may want to come out here.
News of the crash also reached the White House, where spokesman Sean Spicer passed on the condolences of President Donald Trump at his daily press conference.
I want to acknowledge the tragic plane crash that occurred in Australia that took the lives of 5 individuals, including 4 Americans. The President's thoughts and prayers are with the families of the victims, and the U.S. Embassy and Consulate are ready to provide necessary and appropriate assistance.
Back in Melbourne, the crash has raised questions about the safety of Essendon Airport due to its proximity to large buildings and a main motorway. Pilots say airport owners and the federal government are prioritising commercial development over public safety at airports around the country, while Essendon residents have long called for it to be closed. But the Victorian Premier, Daniel Andrews, says it's too early to make any decisions.
Obviously, safety is paramount, and we'll wait the findings of those important investigations. If there are changes, if there are learnings from those investigations and the circumstances around this tragedy, then I'm sure, and I can speak for the federal government as well, they actually regulate airports, but all of us together would stand ready, I'm sure, to make any changes.
Essendon Airport and the DFO Retail Centre remain closed today. Investigators are appealing for anyone who witnessed the crash to come forward and say they'll have their preliminary findings ready in 28 days. For Checkpoint, Elizabeth Brown.
Returning now to the breaking news that a tourist bus has come off the road near Akaroa. Police say a helicopter is at the scene and one person has serious injuries, while a number of passengers have minor injuries. A Hawera man has been sentenced to more than 4 years in jail for killing his 2-year-old daughter, who experienced what's been described as true horror in the last minutes of her life. Esme Kinraid suffocated after her father, Philip Murray Kinraid, forced her face into a pillow when she wouldn't settle at bedtime in June 2015. Our reporter Robin Martin was in the High Court in New Plymouth for the sentencing.
On the night of her death, Esme did not get off to sleep in a room that she shared with her brother, and her father, a chemical engineer, took her to a spare room at about 7:30. It was here the last moments of her life played out. Justice Ellis said Kinraid told police Esme was still struggling, so he put her bottom under his right armpit and placed his right hand on her head.
You said that you held Esme down with a minimum amount of force to stop her getting up again. You said she was squirming, making noises, inhaling and exhaling while she screamed. You said you monitored her breathing and the noises she was making and held her in that face-down position for 5 to 10 minutes, after which you said she settled, letting out a shuddering breath.
Justice Ellis said Kinraid left for work, but before he did so, he checked on Esme and told her mum she was fine. She said after returning home, the 29-year-old again looked in on his daughter.
You described entering the spare room. You nudged Esme and said her name. You noticed she was unnaturally stiff. You turned her over and saw that one of her eyes was half open, that she was not moving or breathing, and that she had discoloration on one side of her face.
Kinraid called 111 and told the operator he thought he'd killed his daughter. His defence counsel, Paul Keegan, said from the beginning his client admitted responsibility for Esme's death, which he described as a tragic accident.
When police arrive, his reaction is telling. He claims that he may have been responsible. He says even to the extent I might have committed manslaughter. He asks police to shoot him. He's shocked, horrified and suicidal.
Kinraid pleaded guilty to a manslaughter charge in November last year, shortly before he was due to stand trial on charges related to Esme's death. Crown Prosecutor Justin Marinovich suggested a jail term of 6.5 years was suitable for this type of offending. He said Esme's mother had suffered unbearably and the fear that the 2-year-old must have felt had to be acknowledged as well.
The horror that Esme must have experienced in the last minutes of her life when her face was held into the pillow and her life was taken. Again, she is someone who's not just a name in this proceeding, but someone who no doubt in those last minutes experienced true horror.
In sentencing, Justice Ellis referred to Esme's vulnerability and the breach of trust between a father and a child. She jailed Kinraid for 4 years and 3 months. An appeal has been lodged regarding an application for the permanent suppression of some aspects of this case. In New Plymouth for Checkpoint, ko Robin Martin Tēnei.
The future of the $900 million Ruataniwha water storage project in Hawke's Bay looks increasingly doubtful following the resignation of another key player in the dam's development. Checkpoint revealed last night that Andrew Newman had resigned from his role as Chief Executive of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council just 4 months into his 2-year contract. A new council was elected the same month as he took up the job. And as Peter Fowler reports, a majority of councillors now oppose the controversial project.
About $20 million of ratepayer and taxpayer money has already been spent on developing the Ruataniwha irrigation project. A definitive decision on its future will be made by a new Hawke's Bay Regional Council, elected last year, which has already placed a moratorium on dam development. A majority of councillors oppose the project. Mr Newman, who refused to be interviewed, says in a statement he is stepping aside to enable the council to take whatever direction it sees as prudent, with the support of a refreshed executive team. The chairman of the council, Rex Graham, says Mr Newman has had to deal with some tough issues, but his resignation won't impact on the final decision.
We are in an independent inquiry. We've got a lot of really good people looking at the numbers and the issues. We've formed a special committee which is very balanced. It has people from the Greens Party in it, has hardcore farmers in it, and we're expecting a decision on time around that, and I don't think Andrew's departure will have any influence at all on that.
Rex Graham says he still puts the odds of the Ruataniwha Dam going ahead at 50-50. A councillor and dam supporter, Fenton Wilson, is optimistic it will go ahead despite Andrew Newman's departure. Mr Wilson says the news is still sinking in.
Chief executives come and go, councillors come and go. He set it up pretty well though. I mean, the scheme, even though we're having a review of everything at the moment, the scheme really is turnkey ready, so other than the land swap. So he's done a great job. He's led a good team, good solid team, wish him well in the future.
Fenton Wilson says Andrew Newman has got the dam project to the point where it's ready to be approved, which is a great achievement. One of the councillors elected on an anti-dam ticket, Paul Bailey, says it would have been a challenge for Mr Newman to stay on as chief executive. Mr Bailey says ultimately councillors will decide if the dam goes ahead.
Like everyone else, I'm awaiting the outcome of the review, and I'll make a decision based on the outcome of that. At the end of the day, that's for a new CEO, that decision's going to be out there. It's not up to them to make that decision. That's up to the 9 councillors around the table, and obviously the Supreme Court to make their decision.
Next week, the Supreme Court will hold a hearing to decide if protected conservation land can be deregistered so the land can be used for the dam. Mr Newman's resignation comes after the chair of the council's development company, HBRIC, and another key driver of the dam project, Andy Pearce, quit in November. In Napier, for Checkpoint, this is Peter Fowler.
The reserve goalkeeper at the British football club Sutton United has quit and been put under investigation by the Football Association for potentially breaking betting rules by eating a pie. During last night's FA Cup defeat against Arsenal, Wayne Shaw began eating a pie on the sideline during the 83rd minute of the match. An online bookie had previously offered odds of 8-1 on whether Wayne, who weighs 130 kilos and is known locally as the roly-poly goalie, would be shown on television eating a pie. The BBC's Joe Wilson takes up the story.
This is not a joke. So says the Gambling Commission, and the FA agrees. Both bodies are examining what went on at Sutton, whilst the man at the centre of it has resigned, having been invited by the club to do so. Prior to the match, odds were offered on Wayne Shaw, the club's reserve goalkeeper, eating a meat pie during the game. The gambling company involved was Sutton's shirt sponsor. In the closing minutes of play, TV cameras revealed Mr Shaw, an unused substitute, munching on a pastry product. He says it was a pasty, not a pie. Earlier today, before his resignation, he told the BBC he was entertaining the crowd and hungry.
Obviously, when all the chants, who ate all the pies, and I thought, well, not many days left in the old legs regarding the football field. I thought, yeah, I'd give them something to chant about.
According to Sutton's manager, Wayne Shaw was in tears when he realised what he'd done wasn't simply fun. The FA is investigating to establish whether there has been any breach of its rules relating to betting. The governing body prohibits anyone involved in professional or semi-professional football from betting, either directly or indirectly, on any match or competition. Mr Shaw stresses he did not place any bets himself, but it seems someone did. Sunbet say they've paid out a 5-figure sum. Meanwhile, the Gambling Commission, which regulates the betting industry in Britain, says it is establishing whether the operator has met its licence requirement to conduct its business with integrity. One way or another, Sutton United may have bitten off more than they can chew.
Joe Wilson reporting, and Wayne has denied the accusation he placed a bet on himself. Now, doctors have now joined the team of vets caring for a baby hippo at Cincinnati Zoo in Ohio after she was born 6 weeks premature. Named Fiona at birth, she weighed 13 kilograms, which the zoo says is about half the previous lowest recorded birth weight for a hippo. The normal range is 25 to 54 kilograms. Despite that, Fiona's doing well with 24-hour care from vets, but she started refusing milk on Monday and became severely dehydrated. Zoo vets couldn't locate her veins because they're not used to dealing with animals so small. So paediatricians from the local children's hospital stepped in and have been helping care for Fiona since. And it's not the first time Cincinnati Zoos asked for help from the local children's hospital. In 2015, Ali the aardvark had CT and MRI scans at Cincinnati Children's after suffering from eye trouble. The teams also helped baby gorillas and consulted on a polar bear pregnancy test. Now, coming up after 6, John joins us again from Christchurch, where the city has unveiled a memorial wall etched with the names of 185 people who lost their lives in the 2011 earthquake, and why the sudden death of former Australian international Dan Vickerman has prompted New Zealand players to seek help with mental health issues. That's all coming up after 6. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. You can text us on 2101 or Facebook us.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening, ko Katrina Batanaho. The police, ambulance and a helicopter are on their way to a bus crash near Akaroa in Canterbury. The police say they received reports the bus crashed down a bank near the Hilltop Tavern. They say one person has serious injuries. A number of passengers are understood to have minor injuries. A Taranaki court has heard of the last moments of 2-year-old Esme Kinraid, who was smothered by her father in 2015. Justice Rebecca Ellis was sentencing Philip Murray Kinraid, who earlier admitted manslaughter in the High Court in New Plymouth today. Our reporter Robin Martin was in court.
On the night of her death, Esme did not get off to sleep in a room she shared with her brother, and her father, a chemical engineer, took her to a spare room. Justice Ellis said Kinraid told police Esme was still struggling, so he forced her face into a pillow. He held Esme down for several minutes before she settled, letting out a shuddering breath. Defence counsel Paul Keegan said the death of the toddler had been a tragic accident. Kinraid was jailed for 4 years and 3 months. Ko Robin Martin tēnei.
The Prime Minister, Bill English, says he stands by New Zealand's strong backing of a United Nations resolution on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Australian Prime Minister has today heavily criticised the resolution for placing too much blame on Israel for a lack of peace in the long-running dispute. New Zealand was one of 4 countries that sponsored the resolution condemning Israeli settlements in Palestinian territories. Mr English says he discussed the matter with Malcolm Turnbull during their meeting in Queenstown last week, where they agreed to disagree.
Australia has a view about it. We accept what their view is. New Zealand was involved with sponsoring the resolution. I think the Australian government probably disagree with that. But we want a constructive relationship with Israel, and we intend to work on that relationship.
The Prime Minister, Bill English. Auckland Transport is repairing its reputation after a senior manager was today jailed for 5 years for taking more than $1.1 million in bribes. Roading manager Murray Noon was jailed for 5 years and the director of the engineering company, Stephen Borlase, for 5.5 years when they appeared in the High Court in Auckland today. As well as cash, Noon and his second in charge, Barry George, accepted thousands of dollars in overseas travel and other perks. Outside court, Auckland Transport's Chief Infrastructure Officer, Greg Edmonds, says the case had an impact on staff morale and tarnished the organisation's reputation. He says they have to rebuild the trust of the Auckland public. Family members of those who died in the Christchurch earthquake are relieved they finally have somewhere to remember their loved ones. Today's earthquake anniversary service was used to dedicate a memorial wall to the 185 victims. It's made of marble and stretches 100 metres along the banks of the Avon River. Bruce McKeekin, who lost his son Matthew, says it will be, for the first time, provide family members, the people of Christchurch and visitors a place to reflect on that day 6 years ago. He says it's great having the memorial on the banks of the Avon, which has a special place in the hearts of so many people. The Trump administration has released new guidelines for removing illegal immigrants living in the United States. The Department of Homeland Security plans to hire an extra 10,000 officers to implement the new measures. From Washington, here's the BBC's Jane O'Brien.
The new guidelines could increase the number of deportations by widening the net and speeding up the process for removing undocumented immigrants. The administration says it will prioritise those charged with a crime, but will also include people who have abused public benefits, misrepresented themselves, or, in the judgment of immigration officers, pose a risk to public safety or national security. However, children who were brought to the country illegally will continue to be protected under the so-called Dreamers Order issued by President Obama.
Jane O'Brien in Washington. Firefighters are using drones to monitor hotspots in the Port Hills and ensure the fire doesn't break out again. The fire is under control, but more than 250 firefighters are working to ensure there are no further flare-ups. Army personnel have been delivering notices informing residents that drones will be used in the area. Andy Thompson is supervising the efforts and says the drones, which collect thermal and infrared images, help firefighters identify hotspots. He says there was a flare-up in a section of Gorse last night, and there have been several more today, but they've all been put out. It's 6:05. To sport, South Africa are chasing 290 to win the second one-day cricket international against New Zealand in Christchurch. A short time ago, the Proteas were 179 for 4 after 35 overs. Earlier, Ross Taylor scored his 17th one-day century and now has the most one-day tons of any New Zealander. The sudden death of former Australian international Dan Vickerman has prompted New Zealand players to seek help with mental health issues. The 37-year-old Vickerman died at his family home in Sydney at the weekend. There were no suspicious circumstances. The head of the New Zealand Rugby Players Association, Rob Nichol, says it's unfortunate it's taken the death of Vickerman to prompt players to get help.
It has hit home, but it's not the first time. Every month when you look globally within the professional rugby player community, there is something happening. Sometimes it gets the headlines, sometimes it doesn't, but it's a form of tragedy or heartache that resonates with the player, and it certainly results in activity and discussion amongst the players and a number of those players to take some positive action.
New Zealand Rugby Players Association head Rob Nichol. And veteran Australian flanker George Smith will make his debut for the Queensland Reds in their opening Super Rugby match against the Durban Sharks on Friday. Smith played 12 seasons for the Brumbies before playing overseas in France, England and Japan. The 36-year-old played his 111th and last test for Australia against the British and Irish Lions in 2013. That's the news.
6 years on, a memorial to those lost in the Christchurch quakes.
This is the first time all the families have actually seen their loved ones' names on the wall. Being able to see them and, more importantly, being able to touch them is incredibly spiritually uplifting.
Heading home after the Port Hill fires.
Bit of ash everywhere and terrible smell of smoke that's still there.
And finally a chance to celebrate in Christchurch.
2 amazing experiences in my life, having my children and seeing Bruce Springsteen in Christchurch.
Morning reports, weekdays from 6.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waitomo, also Coromandel Bay of Plenty and Taupō. Fine spells, isolated afternoon showers today and again tomorrow afternoon in the west. Taranaki to Kapiti, also Taumaranui and Taihape, fine and mostly sunny. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Wellington, fine today, becoming cloudy in Wairarapa and Wellington overnight with possible drizzle patches, then spreading north tomorrow, bringing showers from afternoon. Bulla, Nelson and Marlborough, mostly fine, however patchy rain for Bulla later today and overnight drizzle in eastern Marlborough. A few heavy showers inland tomorrow afternoon. Westland and Fiordland, showers clearing from the south today, mainly fine tomorrow. Canterbury, North Otago and Dunedin, areas of cloud, a few showers mainly inland and possibly heavy in the south this afternoon, clearing tomorrow morning. Central Otago, Clutha and Southland, mostly fine, however a few showers about the south coast later today and overnight. The Chatham Islands, cloudy, isolated showers tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you, Katrina. Checkpoint is coming to you live from the banks of the Avon River.
tonight. It is a beautiful evening in Christchurch, and the reason we are here is that to my left, the right of shot if you are watching, is the Canterbury Earthquake National Memorial. The names of all 185 people who died in the earthquake here 6 years ago today are cut into the marble that runs along the riverbank here. The National Memorial was unveiled and dedicated today, and our reporter Conan Young looks back on the ceremony.
One of the most poignant moments today was a rendition of Now is the Hour in Māori and English by local artist Marlon Williams.
Michael Stewart Coulter Stiant. Adrian, 80, Meredith.
As they do every year, the first responders read out the names of the dead. Bruce McGeechan, who lost his son Matthew in the earthquake, was among the family members waiting to hear the names of their loved ones.
It's the only time the true magnitude of the loss of life really resonates with you, because you can look at the names, you can go across the wall there and you can look at the names on there, but when you hear the names called out and the amount of time it takes to call those names out, that's when it sort of gets you.
The families were all consulted on the design of the wall, which is made of marble and stretches along the banks of the Avon River. Bruce McGeechan says it will, for the first time, provide family members, the people of Christchurch and visitors a place to reflect on that day 6 years ago.
Anyone coming from out of town coming to Christchurch, this will now become part of the feature. You come to Christchurch, see what used to be a cathedral, and now you can come and have a look at a memorial wall, and this will stand the test of time. It'll be here as a feature for a long period.
The dedication on the wall was read by Bev Edwards, one of 3 people left paralysed by falling debris during the earthquake.
Our communities were changed forever. We remember those who died, those who were hurt, and those who experienced loss. We offer our thanks to those who came for us, to those who risked their lives for ours, and to those who supported us. Together, we are stronger.
About 3,000 members of the public attended today's service and afterwards threw flowers into the Avon River in memory of those who died. Among them were Kevin and Annette Sunderland. They come to Christchurch every year for the quake anniversary.
Both of us sort of lost it today. My son, he was supposed to be in a meeting at 1 o'clock at the cathedral doors. Got a phone call just after 12:30 to say that the guy couldn't make it. I mean, it could have been 186, or it could have been 286. It mustn't be forgotten.
Preschool teacher Judith Thorpe helped organise the tying of messages of support to the families to a tree. The messages were then thrown into the river with the flowers. Miss Thorpe said it was a way to show love to others at an emotional time.
Personally, I knew 6 people that perished in the disaster, and it just brings us all back, even though it's 6 years, but we're a really tight community and we're just reaching out and helping each other, especially on a day-to-day.
Judith Thorpe said it was good to see the community come together after 6 years of turmoil. In Ōtautahi, ko Conan Young tēnei.
Thank you, Conan. 6 years ago, exactly at this moment, firefighters were in the CTV building trying to save the lives of people trapped in the building. One was a young Japanese English language student called Narika. She was sitting in a chair when the earthquake happened. She collapsed in the chair down into the rubble of the building that was compressed into a tiny, tiny space. They tried to get her out desperately, and the only way they could do it was to amputate her leg. But Paul Rodwell, the firefighter, said, "We will get one last shot. Give one last shot of getting this beam off your leg." They did it. She survived. She did not lose her leg. And the firefighters who did that risked their lives to do so. Watching over them that night was a woman called Rhonda McNichol. She is called Camp Mother. She's in fact the kind of logistics controller for the team down here. And she was allocating firefighters to places like the CTV building. They did such great work. Earlier, just before the service, I asked them to reflect back on that day.
I think 6 years on, I'm incredibly proud to be associated with today's memorial service, and you know, it's almost It feels like closure, now that we've got the wall where families can come to.
They call you Camp Mum, right? And that's not a disrespectful title because you're senior management, but on the day you were sort of running where everyone was and making big decisions about who went where. How long did you work for from today, 6 years ago? How long did you stay at work for?
So I stayed at work for 5 days, and I never got home to my own property until 5 days later. And I live out by the beach, so out in the eastern suburbs, and the house is pretty much okay, but the contents were all over the place. And so during that time when I was there, I slept pretty rough. I slept wherever I could, under trees in Latimer Square, or as somebody else was getting out of their sleeping bag, I was getting into it. So yeah, it was pretty tough.
Yeah, I don't think we have any idea how tough it was, Paul. You were in a compressed space, rescuing people who would have died were it not for the risks you took, getting them past bodies, having to move bodies to get to them, people who were crushed. There was smoke all around you and you didn't have breathing apparatus on. And I wonder, do you think about that experience, or do you try and push those memories aside?
We did think about it, but luckily for us, where our team were working, there was a lot of, apart from the poor victims that were deceased, when we had the most live patient rescue of 7 patients in that cell.
You got 7 patients out of those conditions?
We did, yeah.
7 people who are alive today because of you?
For our team, yeah. And so because of that, you hold on to that. And, some of the reporters went back to Japan and talked to them. So, you can really sort of take the sort of personal thing. I mean, you can actually sort of see what's happened to them later and how they've turned out. And then, never before do we, in the fires and motor accidents, we have a very brief sort of interface with our patients. But because we're lying down there amongst them for hours, it does become a very personal thing, and you get quite attached to how they turned out and what their families are and everything else like that. And I met some of the victims' families later on to explain to them what happened to their children, and it's quite harrowing, but it was good closure for them as well. Yeah.
And because the Japanese families were a long, long way from Christchurch when it happened, they wanted to know in very precise terms how their children died, didn't they? So you had to have amazingly tough conversations with them.
Yes, correct. Yeah, they sort of culturally they sort of ask tougher questions than we would, and they can handle that better by knowing those facts. So it's better to give them that. Yeah.
And so here we are 6 years on, reflecting on this in the same week that you guys have been running operations and fighting fires up in the Port Hills. And I think everyone just, Rhonda, do you have the sense everyone just wants to say thank you to you and your men and women this week?
Absolutely. I was working at Kilmore Street Station last week, and I was sitting at the keyboard typing away, and I looked up and there's 3 little children standing out on Kilmore Street with, tins of baking. And, and they just wanted to come and say thank you to all these wonderful firemen. They're up there doing an incredible job. So yeah, it's just, it's really heartwarming. It's fantastic. And I'm so proud to work for New Zealand Fire Service and do the job, that we do within the community.
Paul, did you ever think of not doing it after the earthquakes? Because you've been up in the bush and the heat and the crap and the ash and the wind in the past week. Did you ever think, no, I can't do this anymore?
No, like Rhonda said, it's a very satisfying job. And, a few of us might have said we're getting too old for it, but no, it is a very good job, yeah.
You've got a sparkle in your eyes, haven't you?
That's right, yeah. Yeah.
Paul Rodwell and Rhonda McNichol talking to me before the service this morning. That's it from Christchurch tonight on behalf of our cameraman Bradley White and our excellent team down here in Christchurch. Back to Sharon in the studio in Auckland.
Kia ora, John. Back in Auckland, Watercare is denying allegations it purposely delayed consultation on a proposed water treatment plant that could see 18 families in West Auckland forcibly removed from their homes. Residents at Parker Road in Oratia say the plant would destroy their community. Some families have lived there for 3 generations. Zach Fleming has more.
A fortnight ago, Oratia was its usual quiet self. But now it's community versus council. Pickets and signs line the semi-rural West Auckland suburb streets. Hundreds turned out to a community meeting last night. It's because Watercare needs to replace its Huia water treatment plant, which is nearly 100 years old, to future-proof Auckland's water supply. Dozens of options have come down to two: build across the road from the existing one in Titirangi, which is currently native bush, or on Parker Road in Orotea, at a cost of up to 18 homes. Engineers picked Parker Road as the best option in June last year, but residents say the first contact they had from Watercare was 2 weeks ago. Watercare's Water Supply Operations Manager Priyan Pereira says consultation is happening in the usual time frame.
There's been no intent on Watercare on any part to cover up any part of this project. For us, it was just around complexity. So it is a complex matter, and there are, we are in the plant is very critical to Auckland, and so we were trying to be measured in the way we worked with communities to do it, and that was our approach.
But stakeholder meetings that began 2 years ago included representatives from Titirangi and Wairawaitakere, but not Orotea. Watercare's now delayed choosing a site it had originally wanted to make a decision by mid-next month.
Our timetable has been shifted, so there were a few things that got in the way, the big thing being Christmas and New Year's, so we didn't want to start talking to people across that period.
You didn't anticipate Christmas and New Year's?
No, we did, absolutely we did, but we thought it wise to push that back further, so we'd had originally set a target of March, but we recognise that this is an important decision.
If Parker Road is chosen, it's likely Watercare will try to buy any homes that are in the way. But if residents refuse, Watercare could acquire their land under the Public Works Act. Paul Goldsmith's great-grandparents settled on Parker Road in 1905. He runs a feijoa orchard there with his wife and 3 children. The orchard is his sole income.
It's not like that we don't realise Auckland does need clean water. It's just that Watercare do have other alternatives that don't involve displacing families and tearing a community apart.
It's a similar story for Graham Gash. His great-grandparents made Parker Road their home more than 100 years ago as well.
I'm not a Google Earth map. I don't just live on a piece of dirt. The place where I live I was running on as a small child, and now my grandchildren are on there.
And Doug and Julie Wright, who only just finished building their dream home on Parker Road 18 months ago.
Get a letter 2 weeks ago saying something's happening. We email them, they say, oh no, there's no plan yet. And then we find out the plan is for us to lose our home. It's gutting.
Watercare says it doesn't have a preference and will continue asking for community feedback over the coming months. It expects to have made a decision around June. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
The sudden death of former Australian international Dan Vickerman has prompted New Zealand players to seek help with mental health issues. The 37-year-old Vickerman died at his family home in Sydney at the weekend. There were no suspicious circumstances. Vickerman's death has highlighted mental health issues, prompting players to turn to the Rugby Players Association, as sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
The New Zealand Rugby Players Association wants players to see themselves as people first and rugby players second. A Players Association survey in 2009 found a third of players were unprepared and struggled during the first 3 months of retirement, while more than half took 6 months or longer to feel in control of their lives. A reason for that, says Players Association Executive Director Rob Nicol, is that a player's identity can be solely linked to sport.
That's where you've got to resist it and you've got to fight it. You're talking whether it's rugby or a swimmer, a footballer or any professional athletes, as they become labelled very early on and that becomes their sole identity. Well, the challenge we put on the athletes is to say you're way more than a swimmer, you're a person with talent. Take those attributes, take those skills, explore other opportunities in life, find other passions and pursue them.
Nicol says it's unfortunate it takes something as tragic as Dan Vickerman's death for players to seek help.
It has hit home, but it's not the first time. Every month when you look globally within the professional rugby player community, there is something happening. Sometimes it gets the headlines, sometimes it doesn't, but it's a form of tragedy or heartache that resonates with the player, and it certainly results in activity and discussion amongst the players and a number of those players to take some positive action.
The former All Black captain and now Blues coach Tana Umaga says the sport needs to create an environment where players feel comfortable talking about mental health issues.
That doesn't come around by saying it, it's actually doing things where they, I can be a little bit vulnerable, I can show my feelings again, which is not a really male thing to do, especially in a rugby context. We just got to help each other, talk, not just with ourselves, with our families, make sure we're connected in that respect. That's some of the toughest things, is just really trying to get to know all the players and some of their habits, so that when they do come in and they're not feeling well, then we can try and pick that up straight away.
And Players Association boss Rob Nichol believes that environment is evolving.
Back in the 90s, and all that, rugby was great and it had its values and the people, it's always been noticed wonderful. But I've noticed the younger generation now, they are a lot more caring towards one another and they're a lot more connected to one another. So everyone has a crack at the social media space and all that side of things. To be honest, the level of connectivity and the empathy between them is really special.
Rob Nichol says much of his organisation's work lies in getting players to understand their playing careers will come to an end, and then to help them overcome the challenges they'll inevitably face in establishing a new career. He's also urging former players to speak out about mental health problems, saying it'll help current players realise they're not alone. For Checkpoint, Stephen Hewson.
Many immigrant communities in the United States are living in fear as Donald Trump lives up to his campaign promise to crack down on those living in the country illegally. More than 11 million people have now been warned they are at risk of immediate arrest and deportation after the government issued new orders to the country's immigration agents. Under the previous policy, some categories of undocumented migrants were seen as low priority. But now government agencies have been told to find, arrest and deport anyone in the US illegally. Many have lived in the US for decades. The BBC's Rajini Vaidyanathan visited an immigrant community in Maryland.
President Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration has seen hundreds arrested in raids in recent weeks. The government says they're only targeting people who pose a threat to public safety, but some of those detained don't even have criminal records. There are fears the net's being cast much wider. At this housing complex, Oscar's handing out leaflets to educate people on what to do if an immigration officer knocks on their door. Many residents here are undocumented immigrants, here without valid papers. And after recent raids in the area, they're on edge.
I'm scared because, I got family here. I got my son, I got my brothers, and I got my wife. We came here just for live more better and get food on the table.
Buenas tardes.
Oscar's job isn't easy. President Trump's pledge to increase deportations has left many frightened.
They don't want to open because they think it might be immigration department.
This mother of four, who didn't want to be identified, came from El Salvador 15 years ago.
I'm afraid. When someone knocks on the door, I ask who it is first, and if I recognize the person's voice, then I open the door. One of my friend's husbands was arrested by immigration. He was coming back from work, and they surrounded them and arrested them.
Nationwide, there have been protests against President Trump's deportation policies, but many argue that they're not that different from those of his predecessor. President Obama was nicknamed the deporter-in-chief for the high numbers of undocumented immigrants that his administration removed from the US.
The President of the United States.
At his weekend rally in Florida, President Trump stressed the need to deport serious criminals.
The gang members, bad people. I said it day one, and they're going out, or they're being put in prison. But for the most part, get them the hell out of here, bring them back to where they came from.
But recently leaked memos suggest his team are considering wider policies, which could affect greater numbers of undocumented immigrants. Many support tougher deportation policies.
Most people come in here wanting to have a better lifestyle or a better standard of living. But the fact is, there are others who come with them who who mean us harm or just are bad people. And the only way to stop those is to stop everyone.
But for the estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants already in the US, the impact of President Trump's policies on their future is unclear.
Rajini Vaidyanathan with that report. Back to the tourist bus, which has come off the road near the intersection of Summit Road and Akaroa Road in Canterbury. St John says it has sent 3 ambulances and a rescue helicopter to the scene. Checkpoint understands 33 passengers were on board and more than 20 have suffered injuries. Ambulance crews are currently assessing patients. News bulletins will have more information as it comes to hand, and Morning Report will have more on this tomorrow morning. We're going to leave you tonight in Christchurch with Marlon Williams singing Now is the Hour at today's 6th anniversary memorial. From me, Sharon Brett Kelly and John in Christchurch, thanks for joining us and have a great night.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Emergency services are at the scene of a tourist bus crash near Akaroa. A witness says the bus and a car appear to have collided, with a woman in the car seriously injured. He says 33 passengers have minor injuries. St John says a helicopter and 3 ambulances are at the scene near the intersection of the Christchurch to Akaroa Road and Summit Road. State Highway 75 is closed. A Taranaki court has heard of the last moments of a 2-year-old girl smothered by her father in 2015. And the memorial wall to the 185 people who died in the Christchurch earthquake has been dedicated in an anniversary service. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Country life.
Here's my office window. Look at it. Can't beat it. Green, bush, sun shining.
He's got hunting on his doorstep. Plenty of pigs and deer and stuff in there. And